This video is brought to you by Imprint. The last week has been a particularly bruising one for Humza Yousaf. He ended his power-sharing arrangement with the Scottish Green Party, subsequently dealt with the news that he was facing two separate no-confidence motions, and then learned that the Greens would not be backing him in these votes. Now, amid all of this, questions were understandably raised about how long Yousaf could hold on. Despite promising on Friday that he would not be resigning, on Monday he backtracked on this, stating that he'd be standing down as the Scottish First Minister. So in this video we're going to briefly look at how we got here, and then look at what's likely to happen next. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So to understand how we got here, we need to briefly understand something called the Bute House Agreement. Essentially, this was an agreement that the SNP entered into with the Scottish Greens in the months that followed the last Scottish Parliament elections in 2021. Essentially, the then SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon failed to reach a majority in this election, winning just 64 seats in the 129-seat Parliament, just one seat short of a majority. To an extent, this is understandable, given that the system is designed to prevent a party from winning huge majorities, mainly thanks to the proportional voting system used in these elections. Irrespective of this though, to get her over the line, Sturgeon agreed on a policy platform with the Scottish Greens, outlining exactly what they expected the Greens to vote with them on in Parliament, and which policy areas in which dissent was tolerable. In essence, this gave the SNP the support of all 8 Green MSPs. In return for their support, the Greens were given 2 ministers in the cabinet. As such, the 2 co-leaders of the Greens, Patrick Harvie and Lorna Slater, sat in Yousaf's cabinet. Now, while both parties certainly benefited from this agreement, with Parliament passing some legislation proposed by the Greens that otherwise wouldn't have gotten through, and the SNP getting their legislation through with more ease, it would be disingenuous to suggest that there weren't some major bumps along the way. There were disagreements over everything from a decision to freeze local authorities' council tax rates to a decision to pause the prescription of puberty blockers to children in the Scottish NHS. Ultimately, the final straw was the decision by the SNP to scrap a target for Scotland to reduce its carbon emissions by 75% by 2030. This came on the back of a report by the Climate Change Committee, who pointed out that Scotland had failed to meet its emissions targets in 8 out of the last 12 years, and that its 2030 target was unreachable. The Greens obviously didn't like this all that much, with their co-leader Lorna Slater saying that they'd sold out future generations. Concerned that the Greens might have been getting to the point of ending the Bute House Agreement, it seems that Yousaf decided to move first, and on Thursday last week ended it himself. The Scottish Tories were quick to pounce on the discontent, and stated that they would be tabling a vote of no confidence motion in Yousaf. To make matters worse for Yousaf, Scottish Labour also announced that they'd be tabling a no confidence motion in the government, with the Greens making clear that they would vote against the government, and with Yousaf unwilling to negotiate with former SNP MSP and current Alba MSP Ash Regan, it seemed over the weekend that Yousaf had just run out of road. His only option left was to resign, something he did at midday on Monday in a speech at Bute House. This is what he had to say.
My hope was to continue working with the Greens in a less formal arrangement as the SNP moved into a new phase of minority government. Unfortunately, in ending the Bute House Agreement in the manner that I did, I clearly underestimated the level of hurt and upset that caused Green colleagues. For a minority government to be able to govern effectively and efficiently, trust when working with the opposition is clearly fundamental. I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm. I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intention to stand down as party leader and ask that she commences a leadership contest for my replacement as soon as possible. In order to ensure a smooth and orderly transition, it is my intention to continue as First Minister until my successor has been elected, particularly as the Parliament will be debating some incredibly important legislation in the coming days and the coming weeks.
So, what happens now? Well, as Yousaf stated, the SNP now need to select a new leader. And, well, the clock is ticking. They only have 28 days from Yousaf's official resignation to select a new leader, and have the Scottish Parliament vote in favour of their leadership if they are to avoid fresh elections. So it seems the SNP will be scrambling to try and ensure the leadership elections take place in time. If they don't, then a fresh Scottish Parliament election will be called. Now, who the SNP select as their leader will really make a difference as to whether the SNP are to avoid another election. In recent days, it's been made clear just how angry the Greens were at Yousaf's swift decision to end the Bute House Agreement. It's possible that the Greens would actually agree to either re-enter the agreement or even negotiate a new one if the new leader appears like someone that they can work with. If, for example, John Swinney were to become leader, then it seems quite likely that the Greens would agree to some sort of arrangement with the SNP. Being first elected to the Scottish Parliament in 1999, in the first ever Scottish Parliament elections, Swinney has held a variety of high-profile jobs in government, with him even leading the party between 2000 and 2004. As such, he's seen as a steady pair of hands, and someone who can command confidence from all factions within the party. The fact that he's actually already negotiated with the Greens back in 2016 is seen as a mark in his favour. If Kate Forbes were to become leader, though, such an agreement becomes far less likely, despite her stating that she hopes the Scottish Greens will embrace her as First Minister. In the last SNP leadership election, the Greens made clear that they would not support Forbes as First Minister, and would actually end the Bute House Agreement if she did become leader. To an extent, this is understandable. As a party, the Greens are more progressive than the SNP, and Forbes herself represents the more socially conservative wing of the SNP. For example, Forbes has historically voted against gay marriage, and was opposed to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, something the Greens themselves negotiated into the Bute House Agreement. If Forbes or any other potential leader fails to form an agreement with the Greens, then it's unlikely that the Parliament will agree to a leader, and fresh elections will be called. It's the SNP that stand to lose the most from this, as their polling has been steadily dropping for the past couple of years. This is on the back of a fraud investigation into senior members of the party, the loss of the election-winning Nicola Sturgeon, and various instances of partisan infighting. On the other hand, Labour are set to gain the most, with their polling steadily increasing as of late, to the point that, only a few weeks ago, YouGov put them above the SNP for the first time. It's likely then that in the event of a Scottish Parliament election, the SNP will likely lose a number of seats, and Labour could well end up being the ones to form the next administration. But whether we get to this point all depends on who replaces Yousaf, and whether they're able to come to an agreement with the Greens. Maintaining power in situations like this is crucial. In fact, you may want to think through what role power really has in society with Imprint's philosophy course. Study how Plato, Socrates and Kant would have thought about the role power plays and how people should use it in a more moral fashion. Just like TLDR, Imprint is all about turning complex books and topics into something you can learn quickly, conveniently and visually. It's super quick, with most lessons taking less than 2 minutes to complete, summarising knowledge from all kinds of topics, using Harvard professors and best-selling authors to teach you key concepts. It's also convenient because it's all housed in their easy-to-use mobile app, letting you replace doom scrolling while waiting for your train or coffee with actual learning. And it's visual because, well, just look at their app. If you've not used it before, you've likely never seen anything quite like it. Unlike traditional books, their animated explanations help you stay focused, understand concepts quickly, and actually retain what you learn. So join the millions of users learning with Imprint, including me. I'm taking their course called Essential Philosophy Theories and Thinkers, and you can do that too by using the link in the description. Plus, if you use that link, you'll get a free 7-day trial and get 20% off an annual plan when you sign up. Plus, they'll know that you came from us. So check it out, support the channel, and thanks for watching TLDR.